Proud follower of Thomas Merton. He also helps run the New York City Corpus Christi chapter of the International Thomas Merton Society at Corpus Christi Church in Manhattan, where Merton was baptized in the Catholic tradition. So I'd like to give a round of applause to our two speakers. So I'll hand it over to Chris, who's going to moderate the dialogue. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I'm really happy to have you for this month's Sanga. We're really, really grateful and honored and blessed to have His Holiness Krishna Kshetra Swami with us tonight. And Maharaj's new book, Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics, is an amazing, amazing book, an amazing contribution to so many different fields of studies: religion and ecology, animal studies, animal theology, ethics. And we're really honored to have him here to talk about one of the most important subjects in our tradition, which is the cow and the bull. And what we're going to do tonight is Maharaj will speak for about 25 minutes or so, and then I'll have a few questions and some conversation that we'll do together, and then we'll open it up to questions from your end too. So please, as you're listening tonight and hearing this wonderful wisdom, think about some questions you might like to ask and conversation that we can have with each other about this really, really important topic. Many of us know that in the world of religion and Hinduism and in our tradition, people understand cows in many different ways. But there's such a depth of wisdom in cow care that is so vital to how we should live together in the world today. So Maharaj speaks very and writes very beautifully about this. So I'll hand it over to you.
Timarandasya Yananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Nano Vishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Vedāntam Dadati Svapadatikam. First, my thanks to you, Kishor ji, for inviting me to come and speak. The whole idea of eco-sangas and ecological spirituality, spiritual ecology, I think is very important. And I'm happy if I can contribute some ideas to the conversation. Of course, they say talk is cheap. And if there's any subject in the world where we don't want it just to be talk, but action, it's this subject. In any case, I've been engaged on the talking side, that is to say the writing side, for the last couple of years preparing this book. But I thought I'll start with childhood memory. This might be one you're all familiar with from your own childhood. I remember that the milk that we got at home was delivered from a dairy milk truck. I think it was an electric truck. And the milk was delivered in glass bottles with a little sort of cardboard top. I see nodding heads. But I also remember my mother she didn't like to waste anything. So when the milk bottle was empty, she would put them in something to drain upside down for, at least an hour to get that last 3 drops out of it. Anybody else have this in your family? Yeah? Okay, so I'm not alone. I remember also being taken with a an elementary school class to visit a dairy and experiencing then where the milk comes from cows. And that was exciting. Of course, what they didn't tell us at that time was something that I came to learn over the years of what happens with those cows as soon as they're giving less milk. Namely, they are sent for slaughter. So in effect, the dairy industry, in a sense, is an extension of the meat industry. But in those young days of innocence, I just understood milk comes from cows. And cows, you could see a lot of cows out in the fields in the country, even if you lived in the suburbs, as I generally did, coming from a military family. When traveling in the country, you'd see a lot of cows. I don't know now in Western or Midwestern states in America, but in Europe, well, in Belgium you see cows, but the cows you see these cows that are bred for meat. In Belgium they have what's called Belgian blue, and they look something like pigs rather than cows. Our culture is one which, it's really a killing culture. It's normalized systematic killing, and a lot of it was, oddly enough, inspired in the 19th century by the factory system. No, the other way around. Henry Ford became inspired by the meatpacking industry, how to produce cars by assembly line. The railroads and the refrigeration and the railroad made the meat industry explode in the 19th century, so that it became normalized that everyone was eating large quantities of meat in America. I don't know why I'm speaking about this here, because this is not what I write about in my book. What I'm writing about in the book is, we could say, three interlocking or concentric circles of topics. The outer circle is what has come to be called animal ethics. A narrower circle within that is Hindu, so Hindu animal ethics. And then the focus within that is cows. So actually my book is called Cow Care in Hindu Animal Ethics rather than Cow Care and Hindu Animal Ethics, but that's not such a big difference. And I was invited to write this book by the editor of the book series of this publisher, Palgrave Macmillan, it's a book series on animal ethics. You can look it up on the website of Palgrave Macmillan. They have some 37 titles at present. And as an offshoot from that, I would say, at least as one aspect, is our beginning to reflect on how do we treat animals. And what is the reasoning, what is the philosophy, what is the justification for how we treat animals. animals, or sometimes it's preferred to speak of non-human animals, because we can understand, and this is also there in Sanskrit literature, the idea of dharma is important in my book as a kind of starting point for thinking about animal ethics, where dharma has different aspects, and I take it as a starting point for beginning to make a conversation between Hindu animal ethics and Western animal ethics. A lot has been written in recent years on animal ethics in the West. Peter Singer and Tom Regan are the big names, and these two have inspired a lot of writing. And they are, of course, drawing on ideas that go further back in time, and they're wrestling with or arguing against certain presuppositions about humans in relation to animals that go back at least to Aristotle. 2,500 years ago, Aristotle said everything has a teleology. Everything has a telos. You all know this word, telos? Yeah. No. Everything has a purpose. Everything has a trajectory. An apple falls on the ground when it's ripe because of its telos to do so. Water flows down because it has a telos. He was trying to understand, why is the world the way it is? And within that in that line of thinking, he said, animals have a telos. They have a purpose, and their purpose, he said, was to serve humans. And indeed, now we shake our heads at that thought, but that thought has persisted over the millennia and centuries to the present day, that animals, their purpose in life is for human satisfaction. So if humans need to eat to be healthy, and the meat of animals serves that purpose, then that's the purpose of the animals. So, recent animal ethic thought is saying, hold on, wait a minute. That's a big assumption which we don't have to accept. It is based on taking human beings as in a major way, privileged, and it's the privilege is justified by saying that humans are rational beings, animals are not rational. Well, that's been breaking down in recent years because of research on how animals behave, to discover that animals have a lot of reasoning. Not only that, many animals exhibit communication skills which are quite astonishing. I always like to refer, I wish I had the names of them, but a group of scientists, including mathematicians and linguists, did some studies of, I believe it was sperm whales, and they analyzed the sounds they make to demonstrate that they definitely have language, and it's at least as complex as human language, if not more complex. So, what are they saying about us?
They'd rather not say.
What's that?
They'd rather not say.
They'd rather not say, yeah, they're keeping it to themselves. Okay, so Dharma is important, but Dharma is a very big subject and it's very complex, and there are so many angles and ways of understanding Dharma. One might feel that it's best to give up the idea of seeing within Dharma discourse, arguments for an animal ethic. But fortunately we have, especially in the Mahabharata, quite some interesting discussions very much on this subject. One little story that I refer to in this book is about a certain King Dasa. King Dasa was a very pious king, and he was requested to mediate an argument that was going on between the devas, the gods, and the rishis, the sages. They were arguing a point of Sanskrit language. And the question was, the issue was over the meaning of the word aja. The devas were saying aja means goat, and therefore the text in which this word is found, which is an injunctive word saying to offer aja into the fire of the yagya, the sacrifice, means you have to offer goat. The rishis were saying, no. Aja means seed of a plant, a certain kind of seed. So this is going on back and forth, and King Dasa comes along and they stop him and say, please, can you arbitrate? Yeah, what's the issue? And he says, they explain, and then he surprisingly favors the devas, the gods. It means, he says, it means goat. At which point the rishis curse him, and he falls from the heavenly realms down to earth, actually within the earth. It's a longer story. He eventually comes back to the heavenly realms because of his devotion to Vishnu. But it points to a bigger issue, which I discuss in the book, and that is, how do we interpret this literature, this ancient literature? On the one side, it seems to argue, or there are many statements which are speaking about animal sacrifice, ritual animal sacrifice. And on the other side, we find statements saying the opposite. There should not be the sacrifice of animals. And in fact, we get one statement, by the great king, the great grandsire in the Mahabharata, Bhishma, where he's saying, ahimsa, or non-violence, is the highest dharma. He emphatically makes this point. Ahimsa is the highest dharma. It is the highest. It's the highest everything. He has a whole list of what it is. It's the best of everything. Well, so in the discussion, time goes quickly. I just noticed. in the discussion of Dharma, what I'm doing in this book is saying Dharma is a good starting point, but we have something else which is really important for spirituality, and that is bhakti. And the easiest way to appreciate the connection of animal ethics and Hinduism and cows really is by seeing what Krishna does, how Krishna spends his time. Krishna spends his time with the cows. And he doesn't just have 2 or 3 cows, he has hundreds of thousands of cows, according to the Bhagavatam. And so this then leads into a lot of issues, how present-day persons might apply an ethics of cow care in the present world. And this then leads me, in the end, I have a chapter about cow care futures, in which I discuss anticipatory communities. Ta-da! That's his topic. And I specifically give a sketch about the cow care program at Mayapur in India and at New Vrajadam in sort of southwestern Hungary. Just 2 projects. I wanted to write about so many more. I do refer to some others, but I focus on these. The publisher said, you have 100,000 words, not 1 word more, including references and notes. Okay. So it was a challenge. Maybe this will be just volume 1. But this was a very interesting journey for me, in which it was opening my eyes to really a very harsh reality in India. On the one side, there's a lot of, you can say, rhetoric that cows are special, they should be protected, they should be worshipped, and that is going on. There are estimated somewhere between 3,000 and 12,000 goshalas, or cow shelters, in India. I couldn't get a definite number on it, but I got estimates. That's going on, but at the same time, 9 million cows are being slaughtered per year in India. And that's only cows, that's not including buffalo, water buffalo, which I believe is a much larger number, because they are not considered so special as cows. So that's the situation in India today. Worldwide, there are some 300 million cows slaughtered, which comes to 34,000 per hour. And again, all of this is being fed by the dairy industry, which brings up questions about veganism and so on, so I talk about that. Essentially what I say is the vegans have some very good points, we should take them seriously, and if cows are protected and cared for life, and if they are not exploited for their milk, then they actually like to give their milk. They're happy to give their milk, especially when they know they're safe. They're not going to be sent to the slaughterhouse. So those are a few sketchy thoughts to kick things off.
Thank you, Mahesh, very much. Really, the most effective part of your book, an affecting part of your book, is where you do talk about this experience, this practice of bhakti as a way to help us recover our sense of relationship with other beings, and then not just human beings, but all living beings. That bhakti is so much about this experience of relationship and intimacy and devotion that helps us to encounter another being in a way that actually honors their full beingness, I guess you could say, their spiritual being. There's I'm going to give kind of an anecdote here, which I think is really interesting. Last year I was at the Govardhan Eco Village in India, which some of us have been to and know very well. And Radhanath Swami, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, was talking about how for many, many years he's asked every member of the community there to spend during the week at least a few hours with the cows. And he was telling me about this during my trip there last year, and I could sense that this is something he'd been saying for many, many years to the devotees there, and I could sense he was a little frustrated that the devotees weren't doing that, so he kept trying to get them to do this and establish this as a main teaching and part of the community. It's a very complex, sophisticated community, so devotees have a lot of responsibilities there, but he keeps saying, they should do this, they should do this. And I really wanted to ask him why. And he told me that when you spend time with the cows, when you're there caring for them, brushing them, even just spending time with them, in a way that they can sense your affection for them, something happens in your consciousness, in your mind, in your heart, which opens up your ability to relate intimately with all living beings. He said there's something about the cows, something about the fact that they make you feel very sattvic, as we say, full of this mode of goodness, but then there's also this sense of relationship that is there. And I just think that's such a powerful way of understanding that cow care has this ability to help us open up our consciousness and our heart to other living beings. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about that from kind of our tradition or your own experience, and just kind of unpack that a little bit, because it's something Maharaj Radhanath Swami is really wanting the devotees there. He said for them to actually understand what the eco village is about, they have to spend time with the cows. That's the fundamental principle.
Well, I had the good fortune to be in Govardhan Eco Village when His Holiness Radhanath Swami was there, and I told him I'm writing this book and I would like to hear from you, Maharaj, what's your experience with cows, which he has had a lot of. And so he said, come with me. And he took me to the Goshala, and we went inside one of the pens where there were some young cows, and he sat me down in the straw, and we talked for about 2 hours while the cows came around and sniffed us and licked us, and so he was walking the talk, except it wasn't walking, it was sitting. And why that is, it is a little mysterious, I think, but I got a sense of what he is saying there from that time. And otherwise, I have to say, truth be told, I've been running around not having the time to do just that, just to spend time with the cows. I've been advising others to do it, but I'm not walking the talk myself. Something that I heard repeatedly from people in India who are dedicated to cow care, and I like to use this expression, cow care. Personally, I like it more than cow protection, because I feel it includes protection. If you're caring for them, you're naturally protecting them. We don't talk about baby protection. When we have a baby, we naturally protect them, but you're caring for them. So I found that everyone would use this expression, go seva. Seva means service, but it has a sense of sort of ongoing service. Attention, giving attention to and attending to. This is the idea of go seva. And so many of them were saying, "Go Seva, this is the solution to everything, to the world's problems." And I got caught up in that sense, and actually in the last more than a year, sometimes people come to me and they ask, or they'll kind of pour out their heart about their troubles in life. Sometimes they can be very complicated issues and so on, and they ask me for advice, and I say, I think I can help. And you want my advice? Yes, give me your advice. Here's my advice. Serve cows. At that moment, there's always a little silence. And then they go, "Oh, yeah, okay." And they start to think, how can I serve cows? And something changes just in that thing. They never thought of that. They thought, I'm going to, give some psychoanalysis or whatever. And then I come up with this, incredibly simple solution: serve cows. And it seems to work wonders. Gandhi made this point also. He's Mahatma Gandhi, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, at least once, if not more than once. He was very much concerned about cow care, and he said it's through the cow, through serving the cow, that humans learn to relate with the rest of creation. So, okay, we might analyze, if we go to the Bhagavata Purana, the Bhagavatam, cows are identified with earth. The earth appears as a cow in the first canto, the fourth canto, and that it's like an equation: cow equals earth equals cow. I started to reflect on this as I've spent some time with cows, and just try to kind of think, okay, earth, cows, earth, cows, earth. There's a connection there. Cows are always with their head down, eating the grass, which is something that we cannot digest. We cannot digest grass. But cows, ruminants, not just cows, but of course other ruminants, can digest grass. That's amazing. And so the grass in the Bhagavatam is the hair of the earth. And then, of course, in India, they're very fond of pointing out that in early Sanskrit literature, Veda, it's in Atharva Veda and later texts, how the various devas are present in the cow. I looked that up. It's not just the devas that are there. The demons are also there. We're also there. All the different beings are present in the cow. So the cow is considered to be the kind of, one-stop shop for all beings are present in the cow. So when a cow says moo, there's quite some significance there. The cow is longing for something. If the cow is deprived of the calf, what is that feeling? The calf is called Vatsa, and the cow has the feeling of Vatsalya, the parental feeling. to appreciate that relationship, I think also opens us to having a sense of connection with other beings, other creatures. The cow is working on the shell of the heart, softening the shell of the heart, opening by serving. Now, someone could say, well, why is it then that dairy farmers who don't keep their cows for their natural lives, just sell them after some time, why don't they feel this? One scholar, anthropologist, her name is Govindarajan from the University of Seattle. She studied villagers in the Himalaya, and she said one family in particular, they had indigenous cows. They also had some what they called Jersey cows, Western cows. And there was a point at which they decided they have to sell the Jersey cow. The woman was crying. Said, I know this means she's going to be taken for slaughter. We have no choice economically. So in this book I talk about economics of the whole thing, the difficulties. But my point is that those who are with cows, they can also, even they're not, following the full practice of cow care, they will also have that feeling. My whole book is kind of, in the introduction I say, but why cows? What's so special about cows? And I say, why indeed? And then I say, this whole book is on that subject.
You have this really wonderful term that you kind of twist divinity of cows to say that cows are full of bovinity.
Yes.
So I wonder if you could explain a little bit what that means.
I woke up one day and this word came into my mind, bovinity. And I thought, yes. It kind of expresses the idea of the sacred cow in one word. And of course it's echoes the word divinity. And so it's, an abstract noun, you could say, which plays on the word bovine. And I just wanted to call attention. What I wanted to do, because the idea of the sacred cow has become an expression in English of something quite negative, which has very little to do with cows. A sacred cow is a habit or an understanding or a way of doing things, or it can be a lot of things which are kept the way they are for no good reason. And if we would just use higher reason, we would get rid of that sacred cow. There's also the expression holy cow. And I was trying to trace this back. I wrote to some scholars. I assumed that it came from Christian missionaries in India who encountered this idea, and they probably wrote about it and wrote back home and so on. Possibly so, but I was not able to find it. If anyone finds something, all that I could find was that from the early 20th century, in baseball, it became an expression of amazement or astonishment, which you could use without getting in trouble, because in baseball rules, it was a strict rule that you can't use swear words. You could get thrown out of the game. and also the announcers. So some famous baseball announcer, when somebody would hit a home run, he would say, "Holy cow!" And it's so these ideas in our culture, it's either kind of a joke or it's something negative. And what I wanted to do is recover the expression and say, well, there really is a serious idea here. And it may be useful for us to appreciate.
You were mentioning this is kind of a trendy thing amongst different circles, academics obviously, but also we're seeing a lot at the climate strike march a few weeks ago. There were plenty of people with signs saying go vegan, go vegetarian, protect the animals. So there's a deep consciousness and awareness of the sacredness of our fellow living beings going on in all kinds of different places. And there's one story that you mentioned to maybe kind of expand this with the other animals too, from the Mahabharata, about Maharaj Yudhishthira and this dog that he became his lovable companion. And this was something I personally wasn't familiar with until reading your book and another book around the Mahabharata. And I'm not even sure how many devotees are aware of the story. I'll kind of briefly sketch it and you can fill in some details, but at the end of his life, Maharaj Yudhishthira is being called back to the spiritual world. Or is it the spiritual world?
Sanga.
Yeah, Swarga. The world beyond ours. And he refuses to go without taking his dog. And the person who's kind of in charge of this process of him going to Swarga says,
Indra.
Yeah, Indra says you can't take that dog. Dogs are not allowed in Swarga.
No dogs allowed in Swarga.
Which is very opposite from it. What is this movie, All Dogs Go to Heaven? Yeah, right? And, of course, there's great cultural differences between how we love dogs here in America and how dogs are neglected in India. And but Maharaj Yudhishthira refuses to go without the dog. And it's this, in a sense, this kind of, his expression of bhakti is so profound that he's refusing even these kinds of laws of dharma.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about this story, but also how it reflects that someone who has a deep devotional understanding, but also someone like Maharaj Yudhishthira, who's considered the personification of dharma, refuses any kinds of, in a sense, like boundaries between species. He refuses to say that just because this living being is in a dog body doesn't mean that they can't experience full rewards or full realization of life.
Yeah. I mean, I refer to that story, I think, at least 3 times in my book because it's so rich, although it's just a very short episode in the Mahabharata. Toward the end of the Mahabharata, when everyone's kind of leaving the stage, and it's his time, it's Yudhishthira's time to leave the stage. And I find there's a bit of humor there also, because it is like, no, you can't take a dog in heaven and say, well, then I'm not going. But there are so many different aspects to it, but one is he's the king. And as the king, he is showing care for all beings, and he's showing example. So we get this, of course, in the Bhagavad Gita, that yat acharati sheshtas tat evitarojana. Whatever an exalted person or a leader does, everyone else follows. So he's showing, I find, in that little story, a very important message for everyone to follow, to be thinking. It, of course, points to the simple principle that a creature is a creature, whatever form he's in, and that's again Bhagavad Gita. Vidya vinaya sampane brahmani gavi haskini. The pundit is seeing different beings as the same, whether it's an elephant, whether it's a dog, whether it's a cow, whether it's what's called a shopacha, which means a dog eater, considered, it's a designation for a very low class of person, a very uncultured person. And so in that little episode, he's calling attention to this most fundamental basic point. And he's also calling attention to honoring the loyalty of the dog, which points to another subject which I discuss in the book, which is the notion of animal citizenship. And it's not my own idea. In fact, Srila Prabhupada talks about it in speaking of praja as all the citizens of the country. But also, Sue Donaldson and Will Imlicka in their book Zoopolis, which is a very interesting and I think important book on animal rights understood in a positive sense. They go into quite some detail about considering the notion of animals, domestic animals specifically, as citizens. And they break this down into several sort of subcategories of how it can be that we consider animals as citizens. So all of that is kind of shown in this one episode in the Mahabharata.
One last question I'll ask you before we'll open it up to the friends here. One thing I really liked in your book was about this idea of joyful community when you worship cows. And you share this anecdote of someone in the Govardhan Eco Village where they've done Gopuja, or cow worship. And very much experienced the worship here in the Bhakti Center for Radha Muralidhar. Very much the same kind of offering of items, pleasant items. The cows also get a little extra and they get some nice things to eat too. Well, the deities get nice things to eat too, but the cows get some nice grain right in front of them that they can eat as well. And there's an Gur, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, that's what they like, yeah.
Gur and bananas.
Mm-hmm. And you get this anecdote from someone there who experienced that, just how happy it made them to do that, and also how they felt how it brought together the community in a very distinct and tangible way. So I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about that, because that's something, part of what we're trying to do here at the Sacred Ecology Forum is to encourage our community to become more centered on earth care, and something that is not, something that's not an imposition, but something that when you actually experience it, when you're actually worshiping cows or getting your hands dirty in the garden or doing things that are in a sense like worshipable to earth, you experience this like upwelling of joy that is very natural. And in our tradition we have this very distinct practice of Puja, which is an expression of that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, the practice, but also how that is very centering for a community in a very healthy way.
Just bring a cow in here and do puja and you'll experience it. You laugh, but there's a book by an anthropologist called The Cow in the Elevator. You know this book? Yeah. The Cow in the Elevator. Anyway, yes, that's what I saw. This sense of community manifesting around the cow. I also saw it in another community in southwest Rajasthan where they have a huge complex of goshalas. The particular goshala we visited of the complex had 8,000 cows. The entire complex, more than 40,000. But they had a Go Puja event, and it was, they brought one beautiful, I guess, tarparkar cow, white tarparkar, into a kind of gazebo. She was completely docile. She just didn't mind anything. including she didn't mind being crawled between the legs. This was a thing that they do there, and hey, this may be my chance. So I also crawled. You know, you get the full blessings of the cow by crawling between, not, you know, front legs, back legs, so you go this way. And she didn't mind that. So many of the devotees were doing this one after another, and she was just there peacefully. But it gave a nice sense of togetherness around the cow. One thing that I heard from the leader of that group, which I appreciated very much, is the idea that the Lord appears in many different forms. And for him, he said, for me, the Lord, not just himself, he felt it's just in the present age, like for us, you know, Harinam, Harinam. He said, in the present age, the Lord appears in the form of cows. For him, this is the worshipable deity of this age. The presence, you feel the presence of the Lord in the cow. That's an interesting. So kind of seeing in that way, naturally then there is a coming together of community because the Lord is all attractive. And it's also perhaps a little reminiscent then of the Govardhan Leela. Krishna is lifting Govardhan. Everyone is coming together under that hill for 7 days, wasn't it? And nights, including the cows. And they're all together. That's community with Krishna in the center. So, because the worship of cows is affirming that cows are dear to Krishna, and therefore it brings community together because it's pleasing to Krishna, who is pleased by cows being worshipped. So it all comes into a kind of unity, I would say.
Or bovinity.
Or a bovinity. Yes, with divinity we have a unity with bovinity.
There are Go Pujas on the internet. If you search, you find Go Pujas, you find videos.
Yeah, just didn't hear that. You can look up Go Pujas on YouTube and the internet and see this actually in practice. So we'll take some questions. If you have any, we'll try to use this microphone. You can keep your questions short, and so you can make sure everybody has a chance to ask Maharaj what you would like to ask.
It's a question and a two-part comment. Is it okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Quick?
Yeah.
Okay. I was very interested in this. I'm not Hindu, but I come here. I don't think
It's not working so well.
Oh, okay. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the history of cows in Hinduism as being holy and sacred began because only the privileged families were able to get milk at a certain very early history in the history of India and other South Asian countries. Secondly, for those of you who don't know who he is, Mike Stura, who runs Skyland Animal Sanctuary in New Jersey, he will travel 500 to 1,000 miles to rescue a cow on a slaughterhouse truck, simply because they're very big, they're harder to get access to, and that's how far he would travel. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that they're exactly the same. The only difference is the name and the appearance.
Yes, thank you. About the history.
Because following people being able to have some milk, from a cow early in the early days, I don't know when, you know, that's when animal sacrifice became overwhelming in India.
Yeah. Indologists, you know, kind of try to tease out from the texts that we have what was going on. There's a lot of conjectures, and there's no certainty because texts are how much they are being descriptive and how much they're being prescriptive is not always clear. Certainly, the texts that we have are from the Sanskrit texts are from the Brahmins because they were this was their language they were speaking. But how much it's understandable in terms of you know, giving an analysis in terms of class is questionable. How much we can get. So yes, we can try to trace back history, and anthropologists also try to do that, and there's a lot of argument about it. But also there is a continuity to be seen. There is a persistence. Some will try to argue that, oh, this interest, this concern for cows really only arose in the 19th century. No, you cannot say that. It's certainly, I mean, we can go to the 16th century with Chaitanya Charitamrita to see that there was concern there. And but it's also in the Mahabharata and so on. So, how much value there is in trying to tease out a history is a question. So, we do have a notion of dharma. We have a notion of bhakti. I also speak about yoga as a linking between dharma and bhakti. And to me, it's best to, I do a lot of discussion of history and the literary tradition, but then it comes down to what's going on in the present. And what is our understanding from our analysis of ethics, that becomes a point of responsibility for us.
There's two things that I'd like to talk about, or ask you a question. You're talking about spending time with cows and how come it doesn't happen to the dairy farmers, and you mentioned the economics. What is your take on this economics? Because my understanding is that the cow yields, yields a tremendous amount of money. Myself, I did some research. It yields $100 billion a year just killing animals. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to know what your take is on this. And I also like to know, my neighborhood just opened up a butcher shop. It's half a block down from my house. I'm very upset about that. And I have kind of spoken to Krishna. But what does one to do with this? Because this is like a cancer. If nobody stops this, they will keep coming up.
Yeah. Big subject, the economics of cow care. I talk about it in the book. And there's no simple formulas for it. But I would put it this way, that there are short-term, if we're thinking in terms of costs and cost and benefit analysis or something. There's short-term and there's long-term. And in our context this evening, we're talking about long-term values of ecology and environmental care. And the animal slaughter industry is really quite unconcerned about that. and they're getting short-term profits, which are very big, and which they're investing a lot in to maintain. The good news may be that more and more people are seeing that this is not a good idea, and therefore more and more people are coming to Debbie's Kitchen. And get a little plug in there. And I just read an article 2 weeks ago. They did an experiment at one KFC outlet with some sort of meat substitute, beyond meat, and people were lined up around the block,
Yes.
and they sold out within a few hours.
Fake burger.
Right.
Veg burgers.
Fake burger.
Oh, steak burger? They still call it that?
Yep.
Oh,
Fake
steak burger.
Whatever it is. So that, may be a good sign. The meat industry, ultimately, they just want to make money. So if they can make money with something that's doesn't have, two eyes and a mouth and breathes, that's fine with them.
Question here.
I have a question. I've heard that there's a symbiote relationship between the bovine and the human. That when we care properly for the cows, then we benefit enormously. And one of the points of that argument is that, and I'm asking you, who has studied this more than I, whether it's a fact, but what I've heard is that cows give one calf, and they don't have multiple calves. That at the time of birthing, they give birth to one calf, and then they make more milk than that one calf can consume. And that unless the cow is milked, the cow develops mastitis, which is painful and potentially fatal. So, in the context of the vegan movement, and I'm very respectful of the vegan movement because people are motivated, or at least many of them are motivated out of compassion for the suffering of the animals, the cows. I'm very respectful, but arguments such as the human is the only animal that takes milk after its infancy. And I counter that with, the human is the only animal that builds cathedrals and makes, classical music, symphonies and such.
Right.
But at this point, whether it's really a fact that the cow has one offspring, produces more milk than that offspring can use, and if we don't utilize that milk, the cow suffers and we suffer. We benefit by the formation of fine brain tissue, which helps us advance in spiritual culture. And the cow benefits because she's relieved of a painful and potentially fatal situation.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm also not so much the expert on this. I would say, in general, she gives one calf. There may be exceptions of sometimes more than one at the same time. As far as amount of milk and so on, this can depend very much on the breed. There are breeds of cows in India that give very little milk, and there are others, gear cows give more, a good substantial amount, I understand. And Western cows, certain breeds give more, some less. The interesting little anecdote that I heard from one cow herd in Hungary who milks their cows every day. He said, we milk our cows outdoors without tying them. They simply line up of themselves, and we milk one after another. They actually line up next to each other, and he said sometimes after I finish milking one cow, she'll she'll go around to the back of the line. She wants to be milked again. And then again and again and again and again, I heard that this cow has not had a calf for 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, and is still giving so much milk. And oh, we had another cow who we never impregnated because she was born with a bad leg, so we didn't want to, and her mother had it also, so she never had a calf, and she gave milk for quite some time. So this idea that we're sort of forcing, and then similar point about working oxen. I heard from those who work the oxen, they want to work there. They want to show their power. They're strong guys, and they want to show it. They're eager to do that. I think the problem with the vegan idea, as you said, they have this very strong sense of compassion and concern. And that's we need to acknowledge, honor that, and learn from it. What they don't have is they don't really have any metaphysics. They don't have an idea that there is a person, is a supreme person behind who makes this symbiotic relationship, and therefore can also make an exception. Yes, it's true, generally animals don't give milk except to their own young, but cows do. And you'll see pictures on the internet of cows giving milk to dog puppies, right? You see that now. Yeah. Things like that,
Thank you, and thank you so much for traveling all this way to be with us. It was interesting that you remarked on sort of what's happening in the scientific and neuroscientific community around intelligence of more animal species beyond the human, and language, and to some extent culture, meaning making, particularly in marine mammals, and in some others as well. And you reminded us how that has troubled notions of human dominance based on reason, rationality, and language. There are quite a few spiritual traditions that hold some sense of human superiority for other reasons, maybe based on more spiritual qualities, conscience, or other aspects. And I'm curious about your thoughts on this, given our greater understanding of animal capacities.
Yes, nice point. Well, the significance of this idea of human uniqueness for ethics is to understand, therefore we have duties to protect and to care, rather than to say, because of superiority, therefore we can exploit. It really comes down to that simple, because we have superior moral sensibility, it follows that we need to treat moral patience. Here's a term that I came across. There are moral agents and there are moral patients. One of the arguments against having obligations to animals, which comes from Immanuel Kant, and actually I think goes back also to Thomas Aquinas, is that you cannot make an agreement with an animal in the sense of a contract, and therefore obligation will not be mutual. And because humans are moral agents, animals are not moral agents, therefore his conclusion, was we have no obligation. But wait. There are also moral patients. A patient is one who receives the actions of a moral agent. And the general sort of basic point, which goes back to at least Jeremy Bentham from the 19th century, is animals are sensate. They suffer. I think that was always his point. Animals can suffer. And therefore they are morally considerable. So from that sort of basic level, then you add to this an understanding of the spiritual dimension, the fact that there is a spiritual, the fact that there is God, to put it simply. And I get into this subject, it's not about, I argue for what I call the ethics of divine preference, as opposed to the ethics of divine command, which sets this whole Hindu approach quite different from all the Abrahamic traditions. God likes cows, and he prefers that we take care of them than that we don't take care of them. And if we do that, we can connect with him, and if we don't, well, good luck.
So,
Or we use another microphone.
No, it goes into the recording system, so it's fine.
it's important to use this microphone. I'll speak up. So the notion that you mentioned, that you give the advice to serve the cows as a way to overcome personal problems. How do we practically do this, especially for
When
us?
you live in New York City,
Yes.
you don't want to bring a cow upstairs, okay?
Yeah, many sanctuaries throughout New York State, New Jersey.
There's also like children's zoos, they have cows you can play with.
Can you answer that question?
So, if we cannot serve cows directly, then we may find ways indirectly to serve them. One of the ways, the obvious ways, is to financially support those who are caring for cows. Other ways are to speak about it, to bring more awareness to people. You can serve cows by promoting my book, which, by the way, will be available open access, meaning if you don't want to spend the $30 for the hardbound book, which is already a great deal. Normally this book would cost $100. You can get free download, digital, Kindle, whatever. It's available through open access. But you can spread the word on the whole topic. And I think there are probably a lot of other ways one can engage. On the way back here from New Vrindavan, we were a little bit brainstorming. We were thinking we could start Kids for Cows clubs, in which we start them young, thinking about how nice cows are. So many things can be done. Kids for Cows. T-shirt. I'm for cows.
I think we have time for one more question. They've all been moved to silence.
So, I don't think the mic works, so I'll just try to speak up. But you spoke about like the idea of how cows are taken care of and how dogs are not really taken care of, and but it doesn't mean that their like souls aren't sacred.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like how to make it happen to still serve the cows, but not to forget the other sentient beings,
Yeah.
and not to like avoid them in a sense when they also need help.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a how can we question. Obviously, I don't know. I would want to say, if we can give due honor to cows and at the same time encourage people, to honor other animals, then they will see that there is a connection. Actually, going back to the word on Eco Village, there are cows and there's some donkeys,
A couple horses.
There's some goats or sheep or something. Yeah.
Dogs.
And dogs.
also.
And dogs.
Different classes of dogs.
Yeah. So, what I mentioned in the book, which I don't appreciate, is the idea, which I find quite unfortunate in India, is that those who are championing cow care, and they say, when we say cow, we mean Deshi cow, which means Indian indigenous cows, and we don't care what happens to your Western cows. That's been said in public by a very prominent Indian politician in America. He said this in a cow protection, cow care conference last year. I was shocked. So that mentality is completely missing the point, which is taught in Bhagavad Gita. This samadarshan, to see equally. How to make that balance is a challenge for us humans, because we tend to be out of balance beings. G.K. Chesterton said, and I quote him in the book, that actually the human species, it's the humans who are the wild species. And all other species are actually tame, because they all follow their particular ways they're set in their ways, but humans are completely wild. So it's difficult. But I think if we can get it right with cows specifically, then we could get it right with other creatures as well.
Well, Lars, thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing your wisdom with us. We're very, very grateful.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And we have our Sacred Ecology Forum website, and we have on the website a place where you can sign up for our mailing list, and we're going to be happy when the open access is November 25th.
That's what they're saying now.
When that becomes available, we'll be happy to share the link to that for everybody on our mailing list, so if they have a chance to download the book and read it and spread I'll use a Christian term here, the gospel of cow care. So please go to our website and sign up. It's very easy, and you get a chance to hear about our events and different things that we're doing. So Lars, thank you so much, and I'll pass it back to Gopal for some final announcements, and then we'll be...
So thank you both for a wonderful, this doesn't work. Thank you for a wonderful dialogue this evening, and you talk about